Walter, thank you for the great lecture. I've got a question. Let's say we agree, and I hope everyone also agrees, that we should privatize everything. But before that, we know that the government controls a lot of property. For example, lakes and etc. And sometimes the government doesn't effect control like the sea or something. They just let it be. And other times they do control it itself. For example, for electromagnetic spectrum or slots at airports, things we were saying about traffic control. So which one would be better then? Before we get to the full privatization, should we have the government just let it be and have everybody the tragedy of commons, or should the government then, for themselves, take control and sell property? Because also related to that, I'm not sure about the legal statute, but I know that Antarctica, all the governments decided together that they shouldn't touch it at all. So it's even worse. If you could put that also in context.
Yeah, well, this is a very good point. It's mainly strategic, although mine was more theoretical. You're more practical than I am. How do we get from here to there? I certainly don't favor government selling anything because they're not the rightful owners of it. And if they sold it, they would have money. And they have too much money as it is. So the less money the government has, the better. What they should do is give it to the rightful owners. Now, it might, in some cases, it's easy to see who the rightful owners are in case of eminent domain. If they stole it from Mr. Jones, they have to give it back to Mr. Jones. In other cases, it's very hard. I used to live in Canada and worked in Canada for the Fraser Institute. And in British Columbia, I was in Vancouver, British Columbia, the socialist government had a thing called BRIC, B-R-I-C-K, B-C-R-I-C, British Columbia Resources Investment Corporation. It was a crown corporation owned by the government. And they had lumber mills and forests and things like that. And then a vaguely free enterprise government came in and wanted to get rid of this thing. We wanted to privatize it. So what it did, which was not unreasonable, it gave 5 shares of this new company, private company, to every citizen of British Columbia. They had a rule that nobody could have more than 2% of the holdings, which was not free enterprise, but this is a much better way of doing it. Instead of selling it, let the government give it to private people in the form of a corporation rather than just have chaos. We don't want to have chaos. We want the airport to keep running. We want the forest companies to keep going. So my suggestion for the process of privatization would be let the government give it up. Now, that's easier said than done, but again, that's a pragmatic, practical issue of once we libertarians seize power or get power, and now we can tell the government what to do, I would suggest that we tell the government to just give it to private people in some sort of reasonable format. Whereas I said in the Mississippi River, 100,000 shares for the 100,000 people that can make a claim that they homesteaded the river. So I would say that that would be the way to go. Yes, sir?
How do you argue against the idea of natural monopolies?
How do I argue against the idea of natural monopolies? Well, first let me tell you my monopoly joke. There were 3 prisoners in the Soviet Union and in the Gulag, and as prisoners do, they compare notes. Why are you in jail? Why are you in the Gulag? And one said, I came to work early every day, and they accused me of brown-nosing. I don't know. The other one said, I came to work late, and they accused me of cheating the state out of my labor services. And the third guy said, I came to work every day exactly on time, and they accused me of owning a Western wristwatch. I once told this joke to a bunch of antitrust lawyers and economists, and I got laughter for this one. Then I told the monopoly part, and I said there were 3 U.S. prisoners in jail for antitrust violations, and the first guy said, I charged higher prices than everyone else, and they accused me of profiteering. Second guy said I charged lower prices than everyone else, and they accused me of cutthroat competition and predatory pricing. The third guy said I charged the exact same prices as everyone else. It's hard to see how he did given these other guys, but it's just a joke. You have to work with me here. And they accused me of collusion. Dead silence, just like here. Because they knew that what I was saying is that the antitrust law is silly. No matter what you do, you violate it. Whereas the law against murder is a good law, because if you murder, you go to jail. If you don't murder, you don't go to jail. The law against rape or theft is a good law, because it distinguishes between people who violate it and don't. Whereas antitrust is nonsense, because no matter what you do, they can get you. Poor Bill Gates, he was out in Seattle, far away from Washington, D.C. He didn't pay off the boys in the Democrat or the boys in the Republican Party, so they had to use antitrust to get him. It's just a fallacious argument. Now, the idea of natural monopoly is that some things are just naturally monopoly. You have only one seller. For example, roads, but I try to undermine that. The other one is utilities, like telephone or sewage or water or things like that. Well, in my book on water, I try to show that this is wrong. See, the whole thing is timing. Suppose I have a square mile, 640 acres, and I want to develop.
Let's suppose that you have a private whale in the ocean, and I have 10 sharks.
You have a what?
10 sharks.
10 sharks.
10 sharks.
Oh, sharks. Sharks.
And my sharks eat your whale. Sharks will eat. Special kind of shark.
Hypothetically speaking.
Yes. And this situation is a crime. What is it?
No, I think that's a very good question. Some people own whales, other people own sharks, and the sharks are eating the whales, and this is no good. I have a co-author on this one. The reason I have a co-author is I'm sort of good on libertarian theory, but I'm not an engineer, and this guy is a libertarian engineer who knows all about water pressure and stuff. So he and I co-authored this book. It's published maybe 3 months ago, and we deal with this very issue. And what we say is that the shark is just like a wolf. The shark on the water is like a wolf on the land, and the whale in the water is like a cow on the land. So the same way we deal with wolves, we deal with sharks. Look, right now we have the technology to put electronic fences in there. We can put fences, electronic fences for elephants and rhinos and keep them where we want them. Whereas right now there's elephant freedom. They go all wherever they want and they die. Well, it would be the same with not only sharks, but fish and whales and everybody. We can put in electronic fences. Technologically, we have that ability, but we don't have the incentive because the law will not recognize private property in the oceans. You know, every once in a while there's this debate, should we release wolves in Montana? And the left-wing environmentalists say, yes, wolves have to be let run free. And the people with cows or with children say, we don't, what? Put the wolves on your property. The point is that if you see, my motto is water is just fast-moving land. Land is slow-moving water. It's the same thing. I mean, we have mudslides. Land moves sometimes, and sometimes water stays still when it's ice. So it's the same thing. There's an analogy. So whenever I have a problem on the oceans, I say, well, what's the analog on land? And now let's use the land to solve the water problem. Well, in the free market society, would there be wolves? Yeah, in zoos. Because people want to see a wolf. But they don't want the wolf to grab the cattle. So you'd have the same thing with sharks. Would there be sharks in the free society? Sure. And they would have to be fed. And the shark owner would keep the sharks where we want the sharks to be. Away from the whales, away from the fish. But we have to feed them a little bit.
But Walter, in his case, the sharks are privately owned as well.
Yeah.
So you would go after the...
The sharks are privately owned, and you keep your sharks to yourself. Just like you keep your wolves to yourself. Look, we want to have wolves and cougars and lions and tigers. Nobody wants to get rid of them, but we want to control them. And in the free society, the wolves go here, and they stay here. And every once in a while, we let a buffalo out so that they can eat the buffalo, and the wolf owner pays for the buffalo, or the cow, or whatever it is, because the sharks and the wolves and the lions have to eat. And then people will pay money to watch the wolves eat a cow or something, and people will watch a shark eat up a fish or a whale. So I think that's a very good question of, how do you deal with this? And my answer is, I don't know, because we don't have private ownership in the ocean. And what I'm trying to do is extrapolate, because we do have similar problems on the land. The shark to the whale is the same as the wolf to the cow or the buffalo. And we can deal with it on land, we can deal with it on the water. That would be my answer. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I've got a question that I asked David Friedman, and he just cursed me. He never answered the question. So I think I'll ask this to a smart anarcho-capitalist. So, according to your anarcho-capitalist view, let's say that I'm a serial killer, okay? And everything has been privatized. So the government, there's no government, everything has been privatized, everything has a owner. And then as a serial killer, I start killing people that have no ascendants and no descendants whatsoever, no friends. And I take up their property. So, is there any deontological, no consequentialist, deontological argument for someone be legally prosecuted for those offenses? In other words, is there any deontological possibility for a erga omnes legal interest?
Very good question. We have a serial killer over here, self-confessed. Everybody watch out for him.
We know.
See, they know you. And he asked this question of David Friedman, what do you do with the serial killer in the free society with no government? Before I answer, I'm a professor. I'm never supposed to answer the question. I have to go circuitously. So I want to mention that in one of the speeches here I'll be giving is why I don't like Milton Friedman, David's father. Now for David Friedman wrote a book, The Machinery of Freedom. Now David Friedman is an anarcho-capitalist, but he's not a Rothbardian. He doesn't believe in the non-aggression principle. Somehow he's got the free market anarchism and no non-aggression principle. And in his chapter 43 of Machinery of Freedom, he attacks the Rothbardian view. So I wrote an essay saying, this is all wrong. And I sent it to David, and I said, David, here, respond. And his response to me was the same as his response to you. Namely, no response. So that was disappointing, because the only way we're going to get to the truth with a capital T, 1/1,000,000th of an inch closer, is through debate or dialogue. And as Helio mentioned in his very kind introduction to me, I enjoy this sort of back and forth about sharks and wolves and questions of the sort that you're mentioning. Okay, so now that I spent a minute disregarding your question, now let me respond to your question. Look, the government is no better at protecting persons and property against murderers and rapists than they are about anything else. The government is too busy prohibiting voluntary sex, prostitution, prohibiting drugs, prohibiting all sorts of victimless crimes, putting people in jail who don't belong in jail because they only engaged in voluntary interaction with consenting adults, and they're too busy doing that to stop actual murderers. I think in the free society what you would have would be private courts and police forces who would stop you. Now, the question is, well, what about a homeless person or a person who has no heirs? And Murray Rothbard answers that, and he has this thing called Friends of Bums. Friends of Bums. Bums are like street people. Sorry?
Yeah.
Thank you. I need help here. And you see, if every square inch of property were privately owned, the mass murderer or the serial murderer has to murder somebody on somebody's property. So whoever owns that property is not going to be very happy about it. Now, suppose somebody is friendless, but he owns property, and you go and you kill him, and you take his property. Well, I would say you would be the last person on the earth to deserve his property. Anyone could homestead you. Now let me talk about the death penalty a little bit. Suppose that I kill, what's your name?
Gabriel.
I kill Gabriel. And I'm the murderer, and Gabriel is the dead victim. And we have this machine. If you put my live body in it, and you put Gabriel's dead body in it, and you flip the switch, the life goes out of me, and it goes into him. And he comes out alive, and I come out dead. Are we justified in forcing me to go into that machine? Sure. Because what I did is I stole Gabriel's life, and now the machine is transferring the life out of me and back into him. So if there's any justice in the world, it would be that I have to go into that machine and give him back the life that I took from him. So if you go and kill some guy who owns land somewhere, and I have a private police court company, I'm going to grab you and take your life out of you and put it back into that guy. Now, if we don't have this machine, but you know in 5,000 years we'll have this machine, if we don't blow ourselves up before then, right? But we don't have the machine. Now, if you have heirs, what we would do is say that, and let's say you're the bad guy now. You killed Gabriel. And Gabriel has heirs. Well, his wife owns you and can execute you and charge admission for the execution, or can enslave you. His wife can enslave you and put you to work hard labor for the rest of your life. And if Gabriel has no heirs, then I will step up. I'm the private police court system. I'll step up and say, well, he was a client of mine. Or even if he wasn't, I'll be the first one to homestead his life. And I'll grab you and either put you in this machine to give him back his life, and if there's no machine, I'll keep you as my slave. Did I tell you about my problem with the New York Times about slavery?
No.
I have to mention that since it's a little off the point, and I'm good at getting off the point. What happened is the New York Times was interviewing me about libertarianism. They were trying to do a bad job on Rand Paul, not Ron Paul, but Rand Paul. And I was trying to explain libertarianism to them, and they just either weren't getting it because they were too stupid or malevolent. They just couldn't get it. So I said, look, the essence of libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. You can do anything you want, just keep your mitts off of other people and their property. And they still weren't getting it. So I said, look, the only thing wrong with slavery was that it was coercive. Why was slavery evil? Was it because they picked cotton? No, people pick cotton. Why was it because they lived in a shack or ate gruel? No. Was it even because they got whipped? No. Because sadists and masochists whip each other as long as it's voluntary. Oh, I have to tell you my sadist-masochist joke. The masochist says to the sadist, beat me. And the sadist says, no. So anyway, I was telling them that the only problem with slavery was that it was coercive. And if you had a system just like slavery, but it was voluntary, it wouldn't be so bad. It'd be okay, because it was voluntary. And they quoted me as saying that actual slavery was okay. So the president of my university, instead of coming to me and saying, Block, have you lost your mind? Tell me you were misquoted. He writes an article saying Block is wrong. We're Jesuits. We oppose slavery. Block favors slavery. So I'm suing them for libel, which is a whole other issue, because in one of my books I say that libel laws are illegitimate, but that's a whole other story. But to answer your question, you mass murderer, you serial murderer, don't do it. Because in the free society, we're more likely to get you than right now. Right now, you have a shot because the government is inefficient. But with private companies competing against each other to solve problems like that, much less likely to succeed. Not zero. There'll always be criminals, and there'll always be criminals that get away with it. And when we're on the wrong side of the Garden of Eden, but our choice is which system, which institution will reduce this the most. And I think it's clear, free enterprise system. I'm not calling on any more serial killers.
We have time for only one more question.
Oh, I'm having fun. You sure?
I'll take advice tonight while there's still government.
So it's me. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your evictionism theory version? And also, I didn't quite get what you mean by homesteading of life, of one's just recently lost life. How would that work?
Well, here we have a dead body. I hope you don't mind, we're picking on you. And he's got no heirs. And, but he has property. And Jean killed Gabriel. And Jean can't inherit that because he's a bad guy. So Gabriel is an aspect of wealth. He's dead, we don't have the machine, but he's got property. Who should get his property? The first homesteader.
It's like homesteading the rights to get the property back, for example.
Well, he's dead and he's got no heirs.
Right.
So the first non-murderer to come there would be the rightful owner.
To come there and just occupy his land,
Yeah.
or just step on his body?
Well, not step on his body, but bury him, homestead the land, be a squatter. It's unowned land now. It used to be owned, but he's got no heirs, so it's empty. The first one there gets it. And if he was my client, and I'm the defense agency, I would get it because I have a contract with him. Okay, now, with regard to evictionism, are you sure we have to end in 5 minutes, John? Well,
10 minutes.
Look at his evil face.
there are several issues that are very, very divisive, not only among libertarians, but among the general population. One of them is immigration. Another one is abortion. And you have Ron Paul, who is an eminent, magnificent libertarian who's pro-life. And you have Murray Rothbard, who is Mr. Libertarian, who is pro-choice. And I pat myself on the back. I came up with what I consider a principled compromise between the two, and it's evictionism. And what do I mean by a principled compromise? If I say 2 + 2 is 4, and you say 2 + 2 is 6, an unprincipled compromise would be 2 + 2 is 5. Unprincipled, because there's no principle on the basis of which you can say 2 + 2 is 5, except it's a compromise. But I have what I think is a real compromise. Okay, so now the first question is, when does life begin? And I say life begins with the fertilized egg. When the sperm hits the egg, it's a human being with all the rights of any other human being. Because to me, birth is just a change of address. And the baby who is 1 hour before being born and the baby who is 1 hour after being born, the same baby. It's just a little change of address. Certainly 1 minute before and 1 minute after, same baby. By the way, do you know in the Jewish tradition when the fetus is viable? No. When it graduates medical school? But actually, it's when there's a heartbeat. But that's a whole other issue. The reason I mention this is because I want to make it hardest for myself, because evictionism combines pro-life and pro-choice. And part of it would be that you could kill a baby. So I want to make it hardest for myself so that I don't have a straw man argument. Okay. So I assume the baby is a human being, fertilized egg, zygote, whatever it is. Not so fast, because it really is a compromise. Because the human being who is in the stomach of some other human being, unwanted, is a trespasser. It's a human being, but it's in the mother's stomach, and she doesn't want it in there. Now, the easiest one to think about is rape. A woman walks down the street, she gets grabbed, she gets impregnated, and now there's something growing in her. If that's not a trespass, then nothing is a trespass. And yet that baby is innocent. It has no mens rea, guilty conscience. It's not a criminal. It's an innocent trespasser. Judith Jarvis Thompson, who is a famous philosopher, not quite a libertarian, but close. She gives you the following case. You go to bed tonight, and you wake up tomorrow morning, and there's somebody in bed with you, and he's connected to your kidney through an umbilical cord. He's a violinist, some music lovers. He was going to die, and they attached him to your body through your kidneys. Is he a trespasser? Yes. Is he a criminal? No. You ask him, what are you doing here? He says, I don't know. I was in the hospital last night, and here I am. I deduce some crazy doctors connected us. So, what do you have a right? Do you have a right to shoot him? No. Do you have to keep him for the rest of your life? No. Do you have to keep him for 9 months? No. What you have to do is call the hospital and say, hey, unattach us. Now, it'd be nice if you'd keep him around for the rest of your life. It would be nice if you'd keep him for 9 months. But you don't have to, according to libertarian law. All you have to do is evict him. So right now we're in this nice place. Suppose some stranger comes in here and he's walking around, and I don't know who owns this place. Okay, somebody owns this place. Does he have a right to shoot him? Well, not quite, because the guy is lost, he's innocent. But the owner can say, look, this is private property, please leave. Now, if the guy won't leave, that's different. Then he's doing more than trespassing. But if he says, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I'm leaving, that's it. So I say that the mother has a right to evict, but not kill. You see, the problem with abortion is that it's a complex thing. It's two things. One is evict and the other is kill. There's this thing called partial birth abortion, where you go into the mother's body and you suck out the baby's brains and it dies and you pull it out dead. That's pretty despicable, because the baby is viable. It's in the last month. It could live, and you kill it. It's very similar to what's the libertarian view on unions? Labor unions do two things, one of which is legitimate and the other is illegitimate. The legitimate thing that unions do is they have a mass quit. If one person can quit, he doesn't lose his right to quit a job just because other people are quitting. And if you can't quit, guess what? You're a slave. Because the key to slavery was the free association was violated. Free association is the idea that only interaction should be free. So our view on unions is we favor the mass quit, but we don't like the other thing that they do, and that is beat up scabs, replacement workers. So it's the same thing here. Abortion is two things. One, it's murder, and two, it's eviction. Now, it just so happens with present medical technology that in the last trimester, the 7th, 8th, and 9th month, the baby is viable outside. So the only thing the mother can do is evict, and then the baby lives and someone will adopt. And there I take the pro-life position. By the way, I'm sort of pro-life. I love human beings. I'm in favor of human beings. And right now, we pro-lifers are losing. But if we adopt evictionism, we've got a chance. However, in the first 6 months, the baby is not viable. Take a baby 2 months in the womb, you evict, the baby dies. So this is why I'm assuming it's a baby, because I don't want to have a straw man. So it's unfortunate that the baby will die. So it is truly a principled compromise. Now, medical technology right now, the last trimester, live, the first 2 trimesters die. But medical technology will improve. It might take 5,000 years to get a machine that transfers life, but probably in 10 years we'll go down to the 6th month, and then in 20 more years to the 5th month, and maybe in 100 years the baby will be viable at any stage of development. And if we adopt evictionism, we pro-lifers will win. If we don't, we're going to keep losing. You see, what the feminists want is they want the right to evict and to kill. The feminists or the pro-choicers say, I don't want that man's baby to live. Let's say the rapist. But she doesn't have a right to say that.
Thank you.